Welcome back to the Hybrid Athlete Dad podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to go over my half marathon recap, how I got started running it, how the overall race went, my nutrition throughout the race, my training leading up to the race, and really everything that entails going out there and running a half marathon. So, to give you some context, I started running I believe it was in March or April of 2024, so a couple months back when I started running, and I had been going to the gym about 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And I had been doing some slight cardio, but honestly, it was just doing some walking at the gym. It wasn't until I started working with a nutritionist where she recommended that I start doing some cardio. So that turned into me running 1 mile on the treadmill 2 days a week, typically on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That led to one thing to another, led me to running outside. I'd run in the neighborhood near my house, and that'd be about a mile and a half loop going through that neighborhood and running back to my house. And it was about that same time that I discovered hybrid athlete training, which was really the combination of not only strength training, but also endurance training or doing some sort of form of cardio, whether that's running, biking, swimming if you're into triathlons, or just running. At the time for me, it was just doing the running. And I believe I just started running about 3 days a week and really nothing more than that. Tried to be very consistent early on. It would be a mile at the gym on Monday or on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and then running a mile and a half on Saturday mornings and just keeping it very simple. Was just starting to run. Eventually, I signed up for a sprint triathlon, and I knew that was going to be a 5K part of that, so started to just run a little bit further. Again, I hadn't ran probably since college. There was a time in college where I'd run quite a bit, and then I'd been out of college for 5, 6 years now. I hadn't done any running since then, really hadn't done any form of cardio outside of, say, walking with my wife in the neighborhood near us after work. So was really coming from a baseline of someone that hadn't been running for a very long time to now I want to start doing this half marathon. And really what happened is I did that sprint triathlon and I felt as though I just didn't necessarily have enough time to go out there and do a half Ironman, which is what I wanted to do next. I wanted to skip the Olympic triathlon, which is basically the middle distance between a sprint triathlon and you could say 70.3 triathlon. And I felt as though I wasn't ready to do the swimming and biking portion of that, let alone doing the half marathon portion of that. So I decided I'm going to do that in 2025. So I was sort of looking for the next challenge, and I was starting to increase my mileage where every time I would go out and run these 3 days per week, I would go out and I would do 4 to 5 miles at any given time. And I'd keep it very simple like that. And I was looking at the calendar for the rest of the year, and I knew that I just wanted some sort of other challenge. I knew I didn't necessarily want to do an Olympic triathlon. I actually ended up going out there and doing one on my own, not through an event or a race, just wanted to see what the time would be, completing all the steps of that race. And I decided I want to go out and I don't know, for some reason I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to run a half marathon. I believe that was in early August. And I was going to be running this half marathon on, I believe it was October 13th. So I was like, okay, I have 2.5 months ready to schedule. I think up until that point, the most I'd ever ran was 6 miles at any given time. And then I slowly progressed during the month of August, where I'd still be running 4 or 5 miles on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I'd do a little bit longer run on a Saturday. Then I progressed from 6 miles, and then I'd jump up to 7 miles, then to 8 miles, to 9 miles. And then I got to 10 miles. I was like, this race is about 10 weeks out at this point. I feel as though if I can get to 10 miles, I could probably grind through the last 3 miles. So this is probably mid-August. And I looked online and I actually ended up finding a half marathon that was going to be at the end of August, and I ended up just signing up for that. But honestly, about a week out, I was still undecided whether or not I was going to go out there and run that race, and ended up just signing up for it a week out from the event, never having run a half marathon before, never running anything more than a 5K in a race other than doing these long runs on my own. And that's how I ended up doing that. And coming up on that October 13th date, I believe this episode might be out after that, or might just be out right after the October 13th date. I switched that half marathon in October to a full marathon. So that's how I ended up deciding to do this half marathon. I just felt I'm ready now. Why am I going to wait another 8 or 10 weeks to run this race if I'm ready now? And what I ended up doing, which was a crucial part of the half marathon training, is I had been running in a pair of Asics that I had bought on Amazon. They're fairly cheap. They were $40, and I just bought them just to wear around my house or wear out, not to necessarily run with them. I also had a pair of Noble trainer shoes, and those were good, but I found that I was getting very bad shin splints. So the week before the triathlon, I believe the week before the half marathon, on a Monday, I went to the shoe store, I got fitted, I ended up buying a pair of Hokas, and then it was going to be that Saturday was when I was going to be running that half marathon. And I was actually going away on vacation for a few days. Our daughter's daycare was closed. So what I ended up doing was on that Thursday, I ended up running 6 miles on the treadmill, trying to break the shoes in before I was running the half marathon with them. So they were fairly new to wearing these shoes. I just recently bought them. But then another key aspect of it was really learning the hydration aspect of it, taking in enough electrolytes, taking in enough gels, and I've really switched this up when I've done the marathon training. Just I need more electrolytes, I need more gels, I need them early, I need them often. But for this specific half marathon, I had used the Nathan's, it's a quick draw water bottle. You basically hold it in your hand, and it can hold your phone in a pocket or gels or whatnot. And it's a quick draw. You just put it up to your mouth, squeeze, and you drink out of it. I believe it holds 16 ounces, and then throw a scoop of electrolytes in there. So what I did the morning of the race is I would have a bagel, I had yogurt, and then I had G1M Sport from Bear Performance Nutrition. It's basically a mixture of carbs and electrolytes, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I drank that about probably an hour before I was set to run, and then about 15 minutes before I was supposed to run, I had a Go Bar from Bear Performance Nutrition and just loaded up with carbs, and that was really all the fueling that I had done up until the race. And then during the race itself, I would have the Quick Draw Hand Speed for the electrolytes, and I would drink that every so often. I just ran by the water stations. Looking back now, I probably should have drank some water at those water stations, but nonetheless just kept carrying on and only had that one handheld bottle. I ended up running out about an hour into the race. But what I would also do is every 40 minutes, so at 40 minutes and I believe an hour 20, I use, it's like the Honey Stinger gels. I don't know if that's exactly what they're called, but they're fruit smoothie flavored. And I would have that at 40 minutes, and I would have that at an hour 20. Now when I'm training for the marathon, I have one every 30 minutes, and then I have a hydration vest to make sure I have a lot more liquid on me. And I find that works better for me. But that was really the fuel that I had, was the Nathan's handheld quick draw, and then I had the Honey Stinger gels at 40 minutes and an hour 20. Now with this half marathon, I wasn't looking to break any records. I was just looking to make sure that I can complete it without stopping. And that's my exact goal that I have for the marathon coming up, making sure that I can complete this race without stopping. So initially started off the race, and I felt as though my pace was a little bit quicker than what I would have liked. I could just tell that I'd started off a little hot, and I really did a good job carrying this pace up until about mile 9. And that's when I felt as though I hit the wall for this particular race. I felt as though I was just grinding out those last 4 miles. I wish maybe I'd started off a little bit slower early on, but just kept at a consistent pace. Ended up finishing the race in 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 21 seconds, coming out at about 9 minutes and 30 seconds a mile. And that was perfectly fine with me because when I'm training, I'm running about 10-minute miles, 10.5-minute miles, depending on how many hills I'm going to be encountering. And I felt as though I had a lot more to give because you're running on the bike trail for this race, or a bike trail, and then you come into the city that you finish for the last 1/10 of a mile or so. And I just sprinted that and completed. I wish I had maybe not left so much in the tank looking back on it now, but I'm just glad that I had done it. I wish I had maybe stayed a little bit more steady early on. So those last couple miles, I could have gone a little bit faster. But overall, I felt that as though the race went pretty good. And again, I'm not trying to win the race at this point. Right now, I'm just trying to make sure that I can complete this race because that's the furthest distance that I've run before. Same thing with the marathon coming up. But overall, it was a really good experience. And if you're someone out there that's thinking about whether or not you should run a half marathon or a marathon or even a 5K, it's definitely worth it. I find that the sensation of euphoria and joy that you get as you start to get closer and closer to the finish line is well worth it. I anticipate that same feeling in the next couple of weeks when I go out there and run this marathon. And the big aspects for me when it came to this half marathon was, even though taking responsibilities at work, my daughter was making sure to do these runs, and specifically those long runs on the weekend where I can go 4 or 5 miles. That's going to take me 40, 50 minutes. I can do that before work. I can do that quickly after work. Where now, if I'm running 10 miles, that might take me an hour and a half, hour 40. So that's not necessarily as easy to pop out before work or after work. So then I would do that on Saturday, and I would just make sure that I get up early enough before my daughter wakes up to make sure that I get out the door and I get that mileage in before she even wakes up. So that might mean getting up earlier on Saturdays. It might mean making those sacrifices just to ensure that my daughter's not up for too long or that she's still asleep by the time that I get home. And that's really how I trained for this race. The goal is to get faster overall next year when I run these races. But for right now, it was just making sure that I could complete it, making sure that I felt satisfied. So again, that's really the recap of what it was like to run that half marathon. Overall, it was a very good experience. Where I live, there's a ton of hills, so you're always running up and you're running down, up and down. On the bike trail or the bike path that I was running on, there really wasn't that many hills going up and down, so it wasn't necessarily that difficult. There wasn't too much pressure on the knees other than getting a lot of blisters on my feet, and I could feel them coming on when I was running with my shoes the Thursday before the half marathon, running on the treadmill. Overall, the blisters have gone away. I found as though I just needed more time to break the shoes in, and I just ran through those knowing, yeah, that they're probably going to hurt and they're probably going to be uncomfortable, but is it worth me dropping out and quitting this race over a few blisters? No, it necessarily wasn't. So if you are someone out there that's thinking about running a half marathon, just sign up for it. Just push yourself outside your comfort zone. And then it really comes down to the training aspect of it and just making that time to go out there and train. And when it comes to the half marathon, it's just putting in the miles. Are you getting out the door 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week? For the marathon, I'm training 5 times a week. But for the half marathon, I found 3 days a week was plenty enough to allow me to finish the race on top of doing my additional strength training and then just making sure that you have that nutrition and the fueling down properly. But I hope this was helpful for anyone out there who's a hybrid athlete dad or wife or husband or mother, whoever you are out there, and that it is certainly possible to run a half marathon while dealing with responsibilities of a family and work.